20 years and 8 albums. Who knew that Zack Attack would come this far? There'll be about 3 people who really enjoy that reference. My name is Jameson, and this is the Godspeed podcast. I can't believe I've been listening to Bayside since 2005 when I first heard Tortures of the Damned on a Victory Records sampler before heading off to catch them on the Zoomies Couch Tour, and countless shows after that. When interviewing their bassist Nick a few years back, he said something that really stuck out to me. We're working class people who became working class musicians. As you'll hear in the following interview, Bayside's vocalist Anthony attributes this notion to their immense staying power. They never gave into label pressures to go a certain way, write certain songs, or be anything other than what they believed Bayside to be. Anthony has always been one of my favorite writers, and Bayside one of my favorite bands. More than a few times I've been close to getting their bird logo tattooed on me, especially after falling in love with their album The Walking Wounded in college. Their new record is Interrobang, released on Hopeless Records this past week, and it is by far their heaviest and most ambitious record to date.
Yeah, busy day. We were pretty buried with the Battle of the Bands that we've been having.
Yeah, that looks like a huge undertaking.
It's wild. You know, it's funny. Like when we first had the idea, we were telling some of our friends in other bands. And they were like, "Oh, we've always wanted to do that, but we just could never figure out how to do it." And then we're like, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna do it." And then it's like, "Oh yeah, that's why nobody does it."
Yeah.
It is so difficult.
Oh, I imagine so, but I think I have to wonder, if other bands have thought about, like you said, doing that, only because, you were once those bands. Like, you get to support all those young guys now. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love the idea, and it's awesome, and the whole thing is great. It is just, it's a customer service nightmare.
Right. Well, let's talk about the record. I know you got to go in about half an hour, so we'll make it work here. Yeah. It's Interrobang. It's been out a couple days. How are you feeling now that it's out? Do you read reviews? What do you do there?
Yeah, I do. I always like to read kind of what people are saying. Reviews are one thing, but I like to see what the fans are saying. I more read like kind of the input on social media than anything else, just because like we try to give fans what they want, so the sort of market research is really important to us, I guess you could say. We like to see what the fan, that's how we put a lot of that thought into making the records to begin with. It's like, what do people like about our band? What do they like about our past records? What do they not like? What are people gravitating towards? And try to give people what they want, We also use that kind of stuff to figure out set lists and what cities to play in, things like that.
Yeah, and I've been asking this question a lot lately just because, reading reviews, of course, can go one way or the other, but I've spent a lot of years writing reviews, and I still do off and on, but there's many times where I get an assignment for something, and I think, man, like, these people put so much work into this, and if I don't like it, who am I,
Yeah, it's tough. What's funny, though? I think that after, 20 years of being in a band, you start to learn how to read them objectively, how to read people's opinions objectively. I think when you're young, certainly when I was younger, it was like everybody who said it was great was awesome, and anybody who said it sucked didn't know what they were talking about.
Exactly.
That's not a reasonable way to conduct yourself as a human, to think that way. So you have to take the good with the bad. So I've sort of thought nobody really knows what they're talking about. Even when somebody says it's great, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Glad you think that. But still, if somebody says it's terrible, I'm like, well, who are you?
Yep.
But if somebody says, oh, it's the best thing ever, I'm like, well, who are you?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
they might say it's great for all.
I like to know what the fans think.
Yeah, and they might say it's great for all the wrong reasons. Even they're like, well, that wasn't even something we were trying for, but glad you thought that.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm even like, well, who am I?
Sure.
I think it's cool, but who am I?
Right. Have you found that this event, releasing a record, this is your 8th one, have you found that this event has changed over time? The excitement, the anticipation?
No, not at all.
Really?
Not at all. It is. I feel the same way on release day of our 8th record as I did on our first record. It's
That's awesome.
You feel like a kid. It's like Christmas There's gonna be all kinds of things going on. You just can't wait to see what people are gonna say. And you're so proud of this thing. You've been working on it. Like, we worked on this record for close to 2 years. So you've been working on it, especially with the way that we released the record and the way this rollout happened. It was all a secret. Nobody even knew we were in the studio. Nobody knew anything was happening. So it was real, like, we've been keeping this secret for 2 years, and it was like, oh my God, it's here, So, also, like, with the Battle of the Bands and the 2-week rollout and all the kind of things, all the new ideas we're trying on this record, that added like an extra excitement, because I was like, oh, we have all these like fresh ideas. I can't wait to see how they play out,
Yeah, and I want to talk about the rollout, because that it seems like something we're seeing more and more, and I feel like it started a bit with like hip hop, and then kind of bigger. I feel like Justin Bieber just throws a song out there whenever he wants. But do you think that that's going to be something? What have you thought of it so far? Like, are you going to do that moving forward? Is it better, worse? What do you think?
I mean, I love it. We haven't, I think it's better because I think there's a ton of excitement. I think that we got our fans really excited about it. They'd never had a chance to look away from the band. Because I think of myself all the time when I make decisions about the band. I'm a music fan first.
Right.
So I think about how I interact with music that I like, and I try to like make that the most important thing.
Yeah.
And there's so many times there's a band who has a band that I like will put out a single, the first single, they'll announce a record. I'll listen to it. I'll think it's great. I'm excited for the record. And 2 months later, I'm past it. And then I see something on Instagram that the record's out today. I'm like, that didn't come out yet, And I think that every time I say that to someone, they're like, yeah, me too. I have the same feeling. So we're trying to like sort of adapt the business to the business end of the band to just the changing industry. Things are so different now. The industry's so much more saturated. You have so many bands. There was a time where we'd put a record out, and if you were an emo fan or a punk fan or pop punk fan or whatever, like, we were the record that week or that month. You know what I mean? Like, we were the record, and then next month or next week is Under Oath is the record, or Motion City Soundtrack is the record, or Fall Out Boy is the record, or whatever. Now it's like, just on the day that this record came out, just out of, I don't even know all the records that came out that day, but just like out of our friend group, like the Menzingers and Vinnie Caruana and City and Color, and I think there's more than that. So that's just like out of our friends.
Yeah.
Like that, the records that came out at the same time as ours. So, I mean, the idea with the short rollout was all those bands were going to have so many bands are going to put out a record on the same day. And if everybody announces it at the same time, then you're just sort of lost in the shuffle. Everybody's competing for the same space, for the same reviews, for the same interviews, for the same social media space, most importantly, for the attention of the fans. So by releasing it 2 weeks before the record, it was like the deck was cleared. Yeah. They had already all those other bands had already done like what they were going to do. They were sort of in the home stretch, and we were the only ones with like an exciting new announcement record when we made ours.
Right. Well, and does it put more pressure on the back end then? So now the record comes out quickly. Yeah. Yeah. So normally you'd be putting out 2 or 3 videos beforehand, and now it's in reverse.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so much more work, so much more pressure, so much more work, because part of the idea was like, we need to do a 2-month rollout in 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
Like, it can't just be, we're going to announce a record, play a song, and then 2 weeks later the record comes out. So we released 4 singles, which I thought was awesome, because it was, instead of like every couple of weeks, we had a new song come out every 3 days.
Yeah, which was awesome.
Which is exciting. We still did a music video. We still did a full round of press. We still did, tonight I think it's going to be our 4th in-store or something like that. So we did in-stores, we did signings. It puts a lot of pressure, we sell a lot of vinyl. We're the kind of band that sells a lot of vinyl, and a lot of that happens through our website, through our own web store. So that's a lot of pressure. Selling vinyl pre-orders with 2 weeks notice that's a lot of work. You know,
Yeah.
everything about it was a lot of work, but but still, I think it was awesome. It was worth it.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's way more exciting. Like you said, it's you do get tired. I mean, I feel like this with film. I could watch a million of the Joker trailer, for the past year. Like it starts so early, and now with something like Netflix, it's hey, let's watch this thing tonight. But I've seen you talk about this in
Oh my
other.
God.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah, it's the Great British Bake Off. I love the Great British Bake Off, and I binge watch it all the time. They have a new season now that they're releasing one episode a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't have time for that shit. I'm gonna wait for it to be done, and then I'll watch it.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. I should get my wife
like,
on to talk to you about this, about Great British Bake Off.
That's how we. I mean, that's how we consume now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want it now, and if we can't have it now, then I'm moving on to the next thing. You know, I'll move on to the next thing that I can have. So,
yeah.
You know, it is what it is. We don't make the rules, but we do. We live. I work in the service industry. I got to give the people what they want.
Well, and you touched on this a minute ago, but you guys are 20 years in. If someone would have told you, 20 years ago that you'd be putting out a record in 2019, what do you think you would have said?
I would have been very excited, but I mean, we've always wanted to last a long time. That we've had so many explicit conversations since the beginning of the band that we want to be the kind of band that lasts. Mm-hmm. You know, it was more important to us to make an impact and have staying power than it was to be big. You know, and being a band like us throughout the 2000s, the early and mid 2000s, was like running a gauntlet of all these trends, especially in our scene, all these trends that were popping in and out. And we watched all these bands form after us and get bigger than us faster.
Right.
And it was frustrating, but we were like, we're going to stay the course. I'm not going to get that haircut. We're not going to do that on our songs. We're not going to dress like that. We're not going to jump on that bandwagon. It was like I say, it was a gauntlet. Like there was a lot of temptation that we had to resist to try to do things that maybe could have made us more popular faster.
Yeah.
But we looked at bands like Bad Religion, and we looked at bands like Social Distortion, and we were like, those bands were playing like hall shows and squats for however many years, you know what I mean? And look at them now, 30 years later, 40 years later, these bands are like, they still have jobs. And all those bands that popped up that we had to watch pass us by, we watched them on the way down too.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've interviewed other people in your band, and a quote that always stood out to me, I believe Nick said it, was, we're working class people who became working class musicians, and I think that is what
absolutely
lends to the staying power.
Yeah, and we're I think that we're pretty like self-aware, and we're pretty we have a pretty good perspective on things. Like the kind of when I say that I read good reviews the same way I read bad reviews, you know what I mean? I think you have to be reasonable, and like we live good lives. We make really good livings, and all I have to do is like play my guitar.
Right.
And that's amazing, so to sit around and complain that like, well, we never made it to MTV, we've never been on the radio, we've never played arenas, we've never gotten the big support tour, we've never opened for a giant band, like it's nitpicking, you know what I mean? Like, so when you look at it, like 99.9% of anybody who's ever played an instrument in the world would kill to be where we are.
Right. Yeah, no, I have to assume that that's a perspective, especially every time you put out a new record. And even if it does poorly, thinking, I still get to do this. There's so many people that want to be where I am.
Well, Chris Conley from Fizz a Day told me once that if you get to make another one, then your record was successful.
Yep.
And I try to go with that. Like if we get to do another tour, it means that things are good. If we get to make another record, it means the last one was good enough.
Yeah, and really in this world of music, if I think that Kenny from the Starting Line had a quote about, if you don't have to go home and work at a gas station, you've made it. Technically, you
exactly.
Quote, made it.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. I mean, I said something to somebody yesterday in an interview where it's like, we get to live really good lives. Like I'm calling from, I'm speaking to you from one of my houses, and like it's crazy, and like, and I'm not gonna sit here and say my houses should be bigger.
Right.
It's fucking insane. So we we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, we've worked really hard to be where we are, but at the same time, I would hate to be starting a band now, because things are a lot harder now than they were when we started.
Well, and I have to wonder if, a lot of those bands that did come up after you, make it big, and then kind of burn out, if they were taking, the advice that you were talking about, if they were doing the things that the label said because they just thought, well, this is just how the game is played, and these guys are the experts, and turns out that's not true. It's got to be a tough thing to navigate.
Yeah. Well, there's different ways to play the game. You know what I mean? There's people there's one-hit wonders who have more money than I'll ever see in my life. So
Right.
like, I guess there's no right or wrong way to do it. I just know the way we did it.
Yeah.
And I'm no prouder of what I've accomplished than I'm sure the bands that have burned out are proud of what they've accomplished.
Right.
So there's no right way to do it. Like I said, I know how we did it, and it works for us. It was hard. It took a long time. We were a band for like probably 8 years. We were touring for 8 years. We had 3 records out by the time I could move out of my mom's house.
That's awesome.
So it took a while, but like I said, I mean, I still get to do this 20 years later, and that's good.
Yeah. Well, let's talk before we got to wrap up here on Interrobang, of course. This has got to be your heaviest record. I've seen that comment time and time again. I've heard that was a pretty purposeful thing. This was something you wanted to try for a while.
Yeah, that was the idea. Like from the onset, before we even wrote any songs, we were like, "What kind of songs should we write?" And the struggle for us at this point is always like, how do you make your 8th record interesting? It's really important to us to always sound like Bayside. So that's something that's always in the back of our heads. Is it Bayside? But how can we shake it up? How could we do some things we've never done before? I think that we came to like a pretty liberating conclusion on this record, where we were thinking, we've done so many different genres over the years, and we've done so much weird stuff that we've gotten away with musically that like almost anything's going to sound like Bayside if we play it. Like if I'm singing and if Jack's playing the way he plays, and if we're all doing what we do, like we're each like pretty distinct at what we do in our own ways. So we sort of came to the conclusion of like, our acoustic records sound like Bayside, but so does like Devotion and Desire, and so does Prayers.
Right.
They all sound like Bayside. So yeah, that was a pretty liberating conclusion to come to, because we were like, yeah, we could really stretch out like more than we thought.
Yeah.
So with that said, we wanted to make a record that shook things up a little bit, but maintain the sound. And we said, let's go heavier than we've ever gone, because nobody's, again, as a music fan, I hear bands that don't sound, my favorite bands that don't sound like my favorite bands anymore. And we were like, well, I've never heard a record that was heavier than I expected it to be, and got bummed out about that.
True.
I've never put on a record from a band I like and thought, this is way too intense for me.
Right.
This is why is it so aggressive? I've never thought that. So I was like, well, that's a pretty good direction to try.
So since you made this decision with this record, is it easy, or do you look back at other records and say we could have gone more experimental, or we could have been more ambitious there?
I don't think so. I mean, really, if anything, I listen back to old records, and I wish we could re-record it, being the musicians that we are today. We're better. We've played, I don't know how many thousands of shows.
Right.
We have our 10,000 hours now.
Yeah.
So I do wish that we could go back and re-record some stuff. But no, the songs, I mean, there's very few songs that I listen to and I'm like, that song should have got scrapped.
Right. We'll wrap with this here. I would like to ask everyone, as far as writing lyrics goes, do you have a favorite time of day, favorite place? Does it come out naturally? Do you have to force yourself to sit down and write? How's that work for you?
I write always. When it comes to lyrics, I'm writing all the time. I have a notepad in my phone. I have a notebook with me a lot of the time, and I come up with, sometimes I might sit and write an entire page, and that could turn into a song. Sometimes I have one line. Usually it's one line at a time or one thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then I write music first. When I'm sitting down to write a song, I write music, and
Sure.
then I go back to all my notes. I go back to my one-liners. I go back to my thoughts. I go back to the full pages, my notebooks, whatever, and I say which lyrics can fit into this song.
Oh, okay. And this is just because it's something interesting to ask any artist really, but can you does it show up at random, or can you say, all right, Monday morning 8 o'clock, I got to sit down and write some lyrics?
No, lyrics. I mean, musically, I do that just
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't always do that. But where my life is these days, I'm so busy. I have a family. I have a daughter. I do have to say, like, okay, I write from, while my daughter's at school. That's writing time.
Okay.
Or if I'm really like cooking on something, this drives like everybody who's ever around me crazy. But if I'm really cooking on something, then it's like I'll after my daughter goes to bed, I'll get up and go into my studio and start working on something. So yeah, I mean, musically, I do have to kind of write. I do have to write more on a schedule
Mm-hmm.
to an extent. Lyrically, though, like I said, it's all
Yeah.
the time. I could be having breakfast and think of something. I get a lot of lyrics actually from mishearing things. Like I'll hear something on TV or
Yeah.
like hear something in another song, and I think they said one thing and
Mhm.
it's not what they said. I'm like, okay, but I like my way.
Yep.
So like, I'm gonna now that's a lyric.
I've done that from songs too, like, oh, that's a great line, and then looking it up, ooh, nope, I got to use that now.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time actually.
That's awesome, dude. Well, Anthony, thank you. I've been I've been a fan since the Zoomies couch tour days, and
Awesome, cool.
second record and stuff. You have the best publicist in the world, as you know, as well.
She's the best.
Well, I'll let you go here, man. I hope.
Which couch tour did you see us at?
Oh man. Well, so it was at the
Which
Clackamas.
city?
So Clackamas, Oregon, so close to Portland.
Yeah. Okay. We did. I remember that. Funny story about that. That was our first time flying as a band.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the first time we had to fly to a show, and we were like really excited about that.
I think
I remember a lot about that.
I think it was
weekend. We did Portland and Seattle, and then we flew home.
Yeah, and I think I want to say it was with Aiden, who wasn't like anywhere yet. Yep, that's so funny.
It was Aiden, and John Beats was still in the band.
Yep.
It was before John Beats passed. I remember that. I have a lot of memories about that weekend actually. That's funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's crazy also to think, as I've been doing this for about 15 years now, but talking to bands like you guys and saying, all right, so 20 years in, and it's like, I'm that old now. Like I was listening to that stuff back then. That's nuts. So, no, your lasting power is well deserved. So every record's been something special. So I'm stoked on it. Thank you, Anthony. I'll let you go here.
Appreciate it. All right.
Alrighty. Bye bye.
Bye.
I was so excited that we got to release 2 episodes today, both from Hopeless Records. So many good bands on that label. A huge thank you, of course, goes out to Anthony for chatting with me today, and of course, Big Picture Media for always making sure these interviews go smoothly. Shout out to Becky, of course. Interrobang is out now on Hopeless Records. I suggest checking out the title track as well as the songs Prayers and Numb just to get started. This is Jameson with the Godspeed Podcast. Thank you for listening.